Hi everyone, and welcome back to Disney Magic Nostalgia. It's Lawrence here again with another movie review. And today, what I'm going to be talking about is Disney's 20th animated movie, The Aristocats, released on December the 24th, 1970. Yep, so it was released on Christmas Eve in 1970. And the reason why I've chosen to talk about this is because it's just one that I grew up with as a kid. It was directed by Wolfgang Reitherman, yep, and it stars the voices of Eva Gabor as the mother cat Duchess, Phil Harris as Thomas O'Malley, and what's his name again? Yep, Eva Gabor, Phil Harris. Yep. Scatman Crothers, a Scat Cat. Paul Witchell, Lord Tim Hudson, Vito Scotti, Thurl Raven Scott, and Sterling Holloway as Roquefort the Mouse. Yes, Sterling Holloway was a very, very popular voice actor for Disney back in those days. He was the voice of Winnie the Pooh. He was the voice of Car in the Jungle Book. Was the voice of the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. And he was the voice of Adolf Flower in Bambi. And I'm quite sure he did a couple of others as well. Yeah, as I say, there certainly are quite a few I remember him for. And Phil Harris, was a famous actor, quite a famous actor. I don't actually know what he looked like. I've never seen anything with his physical acting in it, but I do know he was very well known. He's the voice of Thomas O'Malley, and he was also the voice of Baloo, and he also did a voice in Robin Hood as well. Eva Gabor, famous French actress, I think, is Duchess. Yeah. So yes, well, the plot of the Aristocats basically is that you've probably seen it. Any big Disney fans will have seen it, but the plot basically is of this mother cat and her three kittens who live with this famous retired actress called Madame Adelaide, and she lives in this big mansion in Paris, in the posh neighbourhood, and she has no living relatives, she has no family of her own, and so basically it's her three cats, her four cats, and her butler Edgar. And what we're doing is we're first introduced to all the characters along with the horse Frou-Frou, who's her form of transport. Yeah, she's got a horse and cart as her transport, and basically firstly you're properly introduced to the kittens as they're riding home back to the house, and you see the kittens' playful nature, just like proper kittens. And they start to play with Edgar as he's driving, and then Madame Adelaide, compliments Marie, saying Marie, who is the female kitten. There's two male kittens and one female kitten. Marie, the female kitten, she's complimented and said to that she'll be as beautiful as her mother. And then when they arrive back at the house from wherever they've been, Madame Adelaide says that she's expecting her attorney or her lawyer, George Odcourt, because she wants to make her will. And then it cuts right to this and then it cuts to this really funny scene with the lawyer arriving. He arrives in his motor car, and then he greets Edgar, and he's like this very old, frail old man who's not very mobile. He tries to climb up the stairs before Edgar can ask him to take the elevator, and he keeps falling back down a couple of stairs. And there's this scene, and the scene gets really funny with a bit of slapstick with Edgar trying to help him up the stairs, and they end up tripping back and forth, and George Otcor gets stuck, hooks his cane by accident onto the back of Edgar's trousers, and so they basically get pushed and pulled, and then they eventually make it to the top in the parlour where Edgar's all out of breath. He introduces George Otcor, and there's this and then there's this funny scene with George and Madame dancing to some music that they recognise from a film she was in that I think made her famous, and they reminisce about that night that she won the award, and then she gets on down to the business of making her will, and while they're discussing her will, Edgar is in his own study, and he hears through speaker, one of the first old-fashioned sort of speaker phones, that Madame Adelaide wants to leave her entire fortune first to her cat, even though she mentions him first. She mentions that she has no living relatives. She wants to leave her entire fortune to Edgar with the house and everything. But then he actually hears George O'Cor question that, and she says no, she actually wants to leave it to her cat, but obviously Edgar will have access to it to provide for them after she's gone. But then after the cat's lives, then Edgar will inherit the fortune, and this is where and then basically this is where Edgar shows his true colours and starts to feel really greedy. I mean, yeah, not that I say I could blame him for feeling that way. I mean, I wouldn't feel very happy if I had to wait, through the lives of a family of cats to inherit a massive fortune. I couldn't blame him for feeling the way he did, but so what he decides to do is, because he's convinced after, since 3 are kittens and they'll live for at least 12 years each, that what he'll do is he'll think of a way to get rid of them behind Madame's back. So what then happens is he puts together this sort of creamy, this creme de la Edgar dish, just sort of like a creamy milk treat for cats. And what happens is we get there's this sequence where we're properly introduced to the kittens, that they've been playing outside, and they're running towards the cat flap, which even has their own label on it, because this lady's so well off, she can mark up everything specifically. So even the cat, it says kitty doors on the cat flap. So they all try and push into the cat flap at the same time, and Marie reminds the 2 male kittens, Berlioz and Toulouse, that ladies should be first. And then of course, being sort of little boys, they would question that. So they start having like a play fight until I think Berlioz knocks a candle onto Marie's head, and then Duchess, the mother, comes in and puts a stop to the fighting, and reminds them that they're going to grow up to be sort of ladies and gentle cats. So then there's this quite nice sequence of Toulouse doing a painting, and he actually paints Edgar, and then and then we can clearly see that Berlioz doesn't really like Edgar, and sort of makes fun of it, and then Duchess reminds him that Edgar's always treated them well. He's very fond of them. He's very fond of them and takes very good care of them. Of course, they're not aware of what he's actually planning to do. And then that's followed by the scene I've already talked about, with Edgar preparing the creme de la dish, and then adding in the sleeping pills to put them to sleep. And then we're introduced to the character Roquefort the mouse. Yes, Roquefort is basically a little mouse that lives in a mouse hole in the music room. And yeah, the first thing you're probably wondering is what this family of cats is actually friends with a mouse. Wouldn't it be normal for them to for him to be hiding from the cats. But no, they're such gentle cats that Walt Disney have taken this extremely soft approach with them being friendly to a mouse. And then Edgar comes in and gives them each a bowl of the dessert that he's prepared. And then Roquefort comes in with a cracker, and they offer him to have some of the dessert with him. So he dips his cracker in it. He has, and then tries the stuff. And then after they've had several sort of licks of the stuff, they start to all fall asleep. Roquefort falls asleep, and then it cuts to the scene in the middle of the night where Edgar basically is taking the cats in their basket while they're sleeping, and takes them out of the house, gets on the back of his motorcycle, and then there is this. Then this is where you get the first real kind of funny slapstick scene with Edgar not being able to control the motorcycle because he's so nervous about getting caught. He actually drives down the subway stairs by accident, and then drives back up them again. And then we meet these two sort of comic relief characters, Napoleon and Lafayette, these two dogs. They're cats that basically spend their time, I think they're two stray dogs that spend their time basically chasing up people on motor vehicles and taking the goods for themselves. So what they do is they start chasing after Edgar, and basically there is this funny scene where they split the motorcycle from its carriage where the cats are, where the cat basket is, and there's a scene with him. And then the funny scenes with Napoleon biting Edgar's backside, and then scenes where Edgar jumps right off the motorcycle when Lafayette bites his legs and jumps right off the motorcycle, and he actually gets stuck on the windmill because he's hanging onto the windmill, and but eventually Edgar does get the upper hand when he manages to get down from the windmill back onto his motorcycle, and it confuses the dogs into riding the carriage the other way, and they end up crashing through the windmill, which is quite a funny scene. And then that's when he supposedly dumped the cat basket, and Duchess wakes up and she realises, she's not at home, she's right out in the French countryside. And then the first kitten that calls out is Marie, and then Berlioz comes up to her. He actually unfortunately landed in the water, bless him. And when they find Toulouse, he's actually still in the basket. He didn't fall out the basket, and he feels he was having a dream. And he says that in the dream, they were all riding and bouncing along on the back of a motorcycle. The thing is, just before this scene, when Edgar checks on the kittens before he takes them out, Berlioz actually does briefly open his eyes and then closes them again quickly. And then, but then Berlioz realises that this wasn't a dream; that it was Edgar that did this to them. He's basically kidnapped them and left them, and of course they don't know why. And then it cuts back to the mansion in the middle of the night, where it's a really bad, nasty, stormy night, like thunder, lightning, and then Madame actually wakes up from having a dream that her kittens were abducted and taken, and coincidentally, she's had a dream about what's actually happened. So she goes over to check on them, and then she realises that, of course, they really are gone. And then Roquefort overhears her in panic, so he decides to go out looking for them. And then it cuts back to the morning at the bridge in the countryside where the cats were left, and that's when you're introduced to the character of Thomas O'Malley, who is this alley cat, who happens to be walking along singing, and the cat's woken up. They've spent the night in the basket to avoid the rain and thunder. And when he sees Duchess, first thing he instantly wants to do, he's definitely attracted to her, It is actually said to be an animated romantic sort of adventure film, is what I've just read about it. So yeah, and he gets Duchess's attention, and she's clearly impressed by his singing talent and his flattering ability. And so she asks him for help, and he says that he'll take them all. He'll take her and the kittens back to Paris, because he instantly gets a connection with the children as well. And Toulouse shows him his alley cat skills. He wants to be an alley cat, a tough alley cat, just like him. So Thomas O'Malley nicknames him Tiger. And eventually, what happens is when this truck comes driving up, this milk truck, he persuades the kids that it is a magic carpet, because he says that they'll all fly to Paris on a magic carpet. I don't know, they're kind of foreshadowing Aladdin or something. But yeah, so he gets Duchess and the kittens on board, and actually he says goodbye at first when the truck drives off, but then Marie falls off waving goodbye to him, and he gets her and he quickly grabs her, jumps up and gets her back on the truck, and then he decides to join them. So they're on the way to Paris, and he really has fun with the kids, because they clearly start seeing him as the father figure they don't have. And he plays a game with them, pretending to make their breakfast magically appear, and it's actually just a carton of milk underneath this rug in the back of the truck. And then when they're having their breakfast of milk, that the driver looks through the mirror and he goes berserk, saying, why has he got a family of cats and a stray cat in the back of his truck? And so he chases them out and throws stuff at them, and then that's when Duchess realises that not all humans are all gentle and kind, like Madame Adelaide, like her mistress. And so then what happens is there's this scene where they start wandering along a train track, because now they have no choice but to walk the rest of the way back to Paris. They start walking along a train track, and while the kittens are in single file pretending to be a train, then a real train starts coming the other way. So they jump. So Thomas O'Malley assists them to jump under the rails onto the bridge, and unfortunately, then Marie falls in the river, which has a current going. So Thomas jumps in after her to save her, and he manages to get her back to Duchess, but then he's pulled along by the current. And then we are introduced to two new characters, Abigail and Amelia. Abigail and Amelia Gabble, that's it. They're these two British geese that they say are on a walking tour of France, and when they spot Thomas O'Malley going up the river, they actually think he's learning how to swim. So what they do is they cut this branch with their wings that he's actually using to get back to shore, but of course they think he's learning how to swim. But unfortunately, as a result of this, he's nearly drowned. But just before he's properly drowned, they do realise he's actually trying to get to safety, so they help to save him, and then he's reunited at the riverbank with Duchess and the 3 kittens. And then, after they're properly introduced, they suggest that since the geese are going to Paris themselves, the Duchess, Thomas, and the kittens should join them. So they all go off to Paris together, and then we cut back into the city at night when they go to this famous cafe where they meet their uncle Waldo, another British goose who unfortunately was caught by the restaurant's owners, and we're going to try and turn him into this new dish they want to serve of roast goose, marinated in wine. Yeah, so he's funny because he's drunk, because he's been marinated in wine, and The kind of funny thing is that when you're introduced to Uncle Wardo, that Abigail and Amelia kind of just forget about the kittens and Duchess and Thomas, and they try to take Uncle Wardo off to bed somewhere because he's drunk, and then it cuts to the scene where they're still walking back, trying to find their way back to their neighbourhood. But due to the kids being tired, Thomas O'Malley suggests that they go and stay in this abandoned pad that he likes to stay in. And when they get there, they find that his friend Scat Cat and this gang of alley cats are currently staying in there, and they're playing music. And instantly, this leads to this musical number scene, where it starts slow with Duchess singing a song. She's actually got a really good singing voice, really charming, really nice, soothing voice. And then you have this scene of like this sort of 60s disco thing with all the cats dancing and the lights, and when you get this really, it goes from this very slow song that Duchess is singing into this upbeat track, the classic song called "Everybody Wants to Be a Cat." And it ends really funnily with Scat Cat and his alley cats all standing on the piano playing the instruments, and then the floor actually collapses and the piano falls through all the levels of the house, and then they all walk out the door still playing all the broken instruments. So it's a really funny scene, and it cuts to them. Then Thomas and Duchess put the kittens to bed, and then there's this kind of a romantic scene between Thomas and Duchess, which Marie actually spies on. She gets out of bed, and the other two then follow her. And Thomas O'Malley tries to persuade her that she doesn't have to go back to Madam. She could stay with him, and he could be like the father to the kittens, and he's going to miss them. And even though Duchess says they'll never forget him, and that she's very thankful for the help he's given her and her family during this difficult time, that she must go back to Madam, because obviously him being a stray cat, he can't understand that, to Madam, the cats are her family. So the next morning, then they do get back to Madam's mansion, and there's a repeat of the animation of the kittens going into the cat flap. But of course, Edgar's there, and Roquefort hears the kittens meowing when they want to get back in. He notices very quickly that Edgar's around, and Edgar's also heard them, so he tries to tell the kittens not to come in, but he can't get out to tell them. So actually, what happens is Edgar goes and lets them in, and instantly gets them in a sack, and locks them, I think, in the kitchen oven. And what happens is, through the lock of the oven, the kittens tell Roquefort about Thomas O'Malley. So Roquefort goes to find Mr. O'Malley, and he catches up with him. And when Thomas hears that Duchess and the kittens are in trouble, he tells Roquefort to go and find Scat Cat and his gang of alley cats. And of course, Roquefort being a mouse, he'd be terrified to do that. But yep, Roquefort goes looking for them, and when he comes across when he does eventually find them, where at first they want to eat him. Of course they would, because he's a mouse, and when he says he was sent for help by a cat, they give him 3 chances to tell him the name, but Roquefort acts like he can't remember, so he gives 3 guesses, like I think O'Brien, O'Grady, O'Brien, O'Grady. And then finally, when Scat Cat's about to claw him to eat him, he yells, "Oh, why do I listen to that O'Malley cat?" And then of course, the cats realise, he was sent by O'Malley, so they quickly run all the way to Madame's place, and because they don't know the way, Roquefort tries to catch up with them, and then there's this really, really funny scene where this man drinking a bottle of whiskey, I think it's whiskey, or no, it's wine, drinks this wine, and he sees the cats running with a mouse chasing them, and then what he does is he thinks he's got too drunk and he's seeing things, and he pours the wine away. And then it cuts back to the house where he's got the kittens in, where Edgar has Duchess and the kittens in the barn. He's about to lock them in the trunk, and he says he's going to send this trunk all the way to Timbuktu. When Thomas O'Malley's there, and he's ready to try and tackle Edgar with the help of Frou-Frou, the horse. Yeah. Oh, actually, no. I just can't believe there's one scene I've actually left out. But since we're near the end of the plot, I'll just talk. I'll talk about the rest of it, and then we'll go back to it. Yeah. So the alley cats arrive, and they team up with O'Malley, and eventually, yes, with the help of Frou-Frou, they do tackle Edgar. And yeah, this really funny scene while Edgar's distracted, having to fight off all the alley cats, Roquefort's able to unlock the chest that the cats are in, and lets them all out. And then what happens is Frou-Frou manages to back kick Edgar into the trunk. They lock him in the trunk, and then just as the people come to collect it, and they assume it's the trunk with the kittens in, but it's actually got Edgar locked inside it. And so, yep, they take him off to be sent to Timbuktu. And then it ends with the final scene. Basically, is Thomas O'Malley with Duchess and the kittens inside the mansion that night, and Madam's finishing off her will. Of course, now she has to erase Edgar. And she doesn't she never knew that Edgar did know about the will. She never knew it was him that kidnapped the cats, and she thought that if he'd only known that he would have eventually inherited her fortune, he never would have left. But if only she knew, hey. And then she decides to. She sees how fond Duchess and the kittens are of Thomas O'Malley, so she decides to keep him in the family. So yeah, the kittens and Duchess got what they wanted, so it's a happy ending. And what she's decided to do is start a foundation with turning her house into a home for all the alley cats of Paris. And then it cuts right down to the mid. Then it cuts right down. It cuts down. It cuts. Sorry, I don't know what to say. It cuts to this final musical number, which is basically is Everybody Wants to Be a Cat, where you get a repeat of some animation from the disco scene in the pad, with different scenes, and everyone's in it. Like Roquefort is being the conductor in front of the piano, and you see Lafayette and Napoleon, and then the last scene you get is Lafayette saying, "Oh, that sounds like the end," and then Napoleon says, because he's the leader, goes, "Wait a minute, I'm the leader. I'll say when it's the end." It's the end, and then that's the end. But actually, yes, coming back to that scene I forgot about, because I just watched it today, actually. Coming back to that scene I forgot about was the scene after Thomas and Duchess and the kittens start to make their way back to Paris on the truck. It cuts to Edgar going into the barn with Frou-Frou, where Frou-Frou and Roquefort are, and he doesn't know that they can understand him. So he tells Frou-Frou that he's the catnapper, and shows her the newspaper article where he's made the headlines, and of course Roquefort and Frou-Frou know the truth. And then he realises, basically, because Lafayette and Napoleon, during the confrontation on the night he abducted the cats, they got away with his hat and his umbrella. He realises he needs to find them and get them back, because otherwise, if the police find them, then they'll know to interrogate him. So he goes off on the following night and he goes back to the windmill, where Lafayette and Napoleon are sleeping in the kitten basket, and on this hay. So it's quite a funny scene. Like, Napoleon's wearing Edgar's hat, and Edgar tries to get it with a fishing rod hiding in the back of the hay, and and eventually Edgar does does get his hat and his umbrella back, and he manages to give them. He manages to get it without actually being seen by the dogs. So, and then that's the end of that scene, and then of course it just continues from there. I think the scene after that is where the kittens and Duchess are heading towards Thomas O'Malley's pad. So I'm sorry that I did forget about that scene. Yeah, I did just watch it today, and I've just done research, but so I'm sorry I forgot about it, but at least I remembered now to talk about it. So, yeah, for me, the Aristocats was, you know, it is a Disney classic. I had it as a kid, one of the first ones I remember having at the age of 4 or 5 on video. It was an old favourite of my mum's because she loved it when she was, you know, a young kid. It was released in 1970, I think, at the time. My mum would have been about 13, 14. So, yeah, but as I say, for me, it was a classic. It's not exactly tragic. It's got not really any tragedy in it. It has, you know, sad elements with the kittens being abducted. But then, of course, it just has this happy ending. It's funny, it's emotional. It has, you know, and the slapstick is what makes it a lot of fun. Just all these slapstick scenes in the musical number. In the musical number with the Aristocats, and also the Napoleon and Lafayette going after Edgar. It's just so much funny, and then eventually the scene where Edgar's defeated and sent off to Timbuktu. So yeah, it's just a fun story. Its running time is only 78 minutes long, so it's considerably shorter than some other Disney films. But as I say, it is really fun. I absolutely love it, and yes. What else did I forget to do? Yes, here is my Blu-ray copy. So you got your cardboard sleeve has a special edition picture of Duchess. When you get the traditional Blu-ray cover here. So yes. Okay, so that was my review on the Aristocats. I'm Lawrence, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you again back here very soon. Bye.